Okay, so we're ready to continue. Siman Kuf Yud, very important Siman with many new concepts, complex concepts in Hilchos Taaruvot. Last time we covered Sif Gimel. In Sif Gimel we were introduced to the concept of Kavua. Kol Kavua kemechze al mechze dame, anything that is considered Kavua, that is fixed in its position, in other words, we know of its existence, is treated as 50%. When something is treated as 50-50, that means you have no roiv. Even though the example given was 10 stores, and of the 10 stores, 9 of the chanuyos of the stores are selling basar shchut or basar kshera, and one are selling basar nevela, and we purchased some meat from one, and then we realized, wait a minute, did I buy from the kosher meat or not? Did I bother checking the hashgacha? We don't always do that. The guy seemed to have a long beard. I mean, you know the joke, somebody comes out of town, goes to buy some meat, and he asks the butcher, is this 100% glad kosher? He says, can't you see the pictures over here on top of my wall? You have the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you have the Baba Sali, and you have Moshe Feinstein. So he tells him, listen, if these guys were down here and your picture was up there, I would buy from them. But the fact that their pictures and you were down here, I mean, that's not enough. Yeah, I mean, you can decorate your store very nicely. Yeah, hashgacha is very important. Hashgacha in meat is very, very critical. Unfortunately, we have heard too many times in the history of our people where butchers have succumbed to the various temptations of mixing treif meat, or even mixing kosher meat, but selling you something which is not as good quality, or selling you something that you didn't really ask for. There's a big yetzer hara. That is why the Gemara says, Tov shebat tabachim legehenom. Of the best butchers, they may end up in Gehenom, because many of them are tempted, And when we're talking about treifas, nevelas, we're talking about being machshil, the masses, being machshil entire communities and perhaps a whole generation. Depends when the problem is revealed, it's uncovered. So there are various issues in hashgacha. Obviously, the hashgacha beginning from the very start with the shochet himself, and hopefully knowing what he's doing. And even if he knows what he's doing, the chalaf, the sakin, needs tremendous hashgacha itself, even if he knows what he's doing, because that does become eventually defective. So that requires hashgacha. Then, after everything was done right, you need hashgacha with examining the animal. Then hopefully it was salted, hopefully it was nicker, hopefully it was, there's a lot of things that go into preparing a piece of meat to eat. And then, of course, mistakes happen. And that's what Taaruvos is all about. Mistakes, sfeikas, we have doubts. We're not 100% sure. If we knew, of course, we would know what to do with it. We could dispose of it. You can sell it to the goy occasionally. You're not allowed to sell on a regular basis treifas. We don't do business with nevelas and treifas, anything that's unkosher. But occasionally, it happens. Yeah. Like kelet tashlichun oisha, the Torah says one of the solutions, you can give it to your dog. If your dog likes meat, something which is not kosher. It's not basar becholov that you can't have hanoah from. So, of course, if you have doubts, we know how to dispose of it. The problem is when you have large amounts, when you've cooked up your Shabbos meals, and now you have a doubt whether there's a problem of kashrus involved. What do you do? So here, we're discussing a situation where you bought a piece of meat, you have a package of meat, and you don't know where it came from. And the matzav is, the circumstances are such that the vast majority of the stores sell kosher meat. Oh, well, then we have a majority, don't we? No. This is not the regular majority that we've been discussing all along, even though you have 9 versus 1, and that's even better than the regular majority, 9 versus 1. That's the example of the Gemara, and the chidush here, and it's a big chidush, that it's exeris hakosov. It's exeris hakosov that this is not considered roiv. Why isn't it considered roiv? So we explain because the isur is nikar. The isur is nikar versus a real typical taaruvos where the isur is not nikar. Where the isur is not nikar, so you have a real taaruvos, we have a din of achri rabim lehatois, according to one opinion. That's how we say that we're soymech on the roiv. Just then we have a problem of how do we eat it? Well, don't eat it all together because you could for sure be poigea, you're going to be eating the isur. All right, that's a separate problem. But in a taruves, the Isser is not nikar. That is why we have a taruves. But the Isser is nikar when you have a store that we know it sells treif. That's the store. Just we have a problem that this gentleman does not know where he bought it. So that's called kavua. It's an Isser kavua, which means it is nikar versus not nikar. Gzeros hakosov, that it's not. There's no taruvis of roiv here, and it's mechza al mechza.
And that mechza is
no, it's the raisa. It's exeris akosov. There are some poskim who hold that in pirush lefonenu, if it's somebody bought it, not me, somebody else, a goy, for example, and went out that could be perhaps a kavod derabbanan. No, for a Jew himself taking from there, it doesn't work. That's the whole.
But you bought it and gave it to.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
No, it was because it right away has a din of kavua.
Well, he bought it already.
Yeah, right. But pirush lefonenu, somehow it came out of there. We just don't know where it came out from. That could be a question amongst the poskim whether it's derabbanan or midoraisa. Derabbanan, there would be exero shemo yikach mina kavua lechatchila. So there's different reasons to be machmir. The only exception to this kind of a situation is when it's a complete porosh, not lefoneinu. In other words, when you see a piece of meat lying there somewhere and you don't know where it came from. So we have another rule of called the porosh meruba porosh, which is a very significant rule. It follows the logic of roiv, that whenever you have a majority rules, whether it's in a basin, whether it's a package that you don't know where it came from, but when you were involved in taking and actually doing the buying, that's where it's a chidush. And when we say it's a chidush, it actually turns out to be, it will be a kula in some ways, because it's a chidush. Here we're saying it's a chumrah, because we're treating it as mechza al mechza, there's no roiv. So because it's a chidush, we will see the Ran, and we will see others who say that because of that, it's different, it's unique. And we're not going to answer in every situation that arises, in all the consequences that may arise. And that's what we will be talking today about, an additional interesting situation that can arise even though it started out as a kavua. What else could happen now? What else could happen? I'll cheat a little bit and I'll tell you. Well, what happens if that which you took by mistake, unintentionally, got mixed up in a terulis? Okay? So in other words, things can become more complicated, but we will see that obviously these additional steps may make a difference, or they may not, depends how you hold. Yes?
You mentioned something, Shema Yavo.
Shema yikach min kavua. Yeah, there's a gzera by a kavua derabbanan. Why should it be also midrabbanan? Because Shema yikach min kavua.
What is it?
A kavua derabbanan is whenever it's not kavua derai. So we gave various scenarios where the meforshim hold this may not qualify as a kavua derai of mechza mechza, but it's going to be also midrabbanan because it's similar to the real McCoy, similar to the real kavua.
Is there here Rabbanan and we see kavua?
Yeah.
Or is the Isser D'Oraisa and the kavua is the Rabbanan?
No, it's an Isser D'Rabbanan.
So it's not. So it's.
But it's an Isser D'Rabbanan that is not
chicken that was cooked.
Yeah, but nevertheless, it's still Asr.
But it's a kavua.
But it's a kavua.
If it was a D'Oraisa, we would call it kavua. So if it's a Rabbanan, we also
right,
call it.
Exactly. Yeah, which makes it stricter than perhaps some other suffix or some other Isser D'Rabbanan.
Does it become
we'll see.
So the Isser D'Rabbanan itself is not as full as the D'Oraisa. But if it's a kavua, the Rabbanan that's kavua,
right,
it now becomes more aser
than some other Isser D'Rabbanan.
Then it itself it was a kavua.
Then if it was not kavua, which we'll see today. That's what we'll be learning today, is what this kavua accomplishes. In other words, in other scenarios, what it could be. It could be a kula, it could be a chumrah, because of what it is, because of what it represents. In other words, we know that, for now, we do know, from what we've learned so far, is that kavua is like half-half. We don't treat it as a regulatory, even though we talk about a majority here.
But also the kula.
There are situations where it could be the kula.
If it was 9 goyim and 1 kosher, 50 on the
yeah, and in that case it would be a suffix derabbanan. That's the example we gave, where even though it's kavua, but it's kavua derabbanan, if there would be a suffix, it would be a suffix derabbanan lekula. Well, because anytime you have a suffix in a derabbanan, it's still a suffix derabbanan.
Right, but what is the Rabbanan here? I'm saying there are 9 non-kosher butcher one, and I don't remember why I bought the meat.
Yeah.
This is a suffix derabanan?
No. In the event, you're dealing with a suffix derabanan.
So the isser on the meat is a suffix derabanan.
Right. Right. In the event where you may have a derabanan.
So that becomes completely permitted.
If you have a suffix, it may be a suffix derabanan. So we said it sometimes can become a kula too. Just the only thing is that I added was that the fact that it's a kavua is a serious kind of an isser. In other words, we take it seriously because it's a form of kavua. We don't treat it lightly, as we would ordinarily any roiv, as far as mevatim misol lechatchila and all kinds of things. This would be different, as we will see in Sif Dalet and in the later Sifim too. Yeah, we gave various scenarios for kavua, various scenarios that either there's a machlokes whether it's kavua or not. I don't know if we should go through them again. Whether you remember from which store you bought, whether they're all kosher, but you only found out when you came home that one had a delivery of treifas that day. Various scenarios of what constitutes kavua. Is kavua will kavua always be kavua, even in that situation? From which store you took, but you heard one of them is treif. From which store you took, but you don't know where the treif is. Some say that would be a nisur deraisa. It's a suffix deraisa, a real suffix deraisa, and some say no. So there is quite a bit of a machlokes on which scenario constitutes a real kavua. All we know is the typical scenario, and that's the scenario of the Gemara, where everybody's in agreement, where you actually took, you were involved, but we don't know from which store it was. And there is one out there that is selling treifas. So this halacha is important. I mean, it can come up, as we've said, it does come up in various other halachas when you have these kind of sfeikas, and it could happen in me too. I mean, should you be mekel in hefsem meruba or not would depend, of course, if it's a real deraisa, or if at least you could be mitzaref the ones who hold that it's a kavua derabanan. That's where it could make a difference. So if you have hefsem meruba situation. Otherwise, we're basically following the regular halacha that there's no machlokes on. All right, we're ready to go to Sif Dalet. Sif Dalet is a very interesting. Before actually we go to Sif Dalet, remember we also covered Basar shenis'ala min ha'ayin. I wasn't sure how much to get into that again because it's a separate Siman. But Basar
mentioned that ultimately not really.
According to the Ramah, right, we can be mekel if there is tvias ayin. Remember Basar shenis'ala min ha'ayin? You haven't seen it. Maybe it was replaced. It could have been replaced by an animal, if that's possible in a situation where that could be, or it was replaced by the same goy who put another package, a similar brown bag, is it called? Those down and replace what you had put there. So if you can actually recognize it, or if you have a tvias ayin on it, or in other words, which is basically you can recognize it, or if it has a siman, then obviously there's no problem. So when things say kosher on them, glad kosher with a seal in its package, you don't have to be concerned. And that's why we want double sealings. We want double seals on wine, especially yain mevushal. We don't want them to have opened it up, which would, of course, bring a problem. So far as it's not open, it's not a problem. He can touch, he can do whatever he wants to it, right? It's not a problem if it's... When something is not sealed, anything could happen. I had a case in my house where we had a maid. We've had maids all the time, but this one was interesting. My wife comes in one day, or I came in, and all of a sudden we see her cooking her food in our pot. She brought her meat, her food, in our pot. She says, "What are you doing here?" I guess she wanted to have one of her favorite dishes that day, and she didn't like what we have. No permission was asked, and that's it. She, of course, didn't know. And of course, my wife, not wanting to deal with the hagala, which she could have done, in that case it was a pot, she just, take it. She told him, just take the pot and take it home with you. I'll never do that again. Never bring your own food here.
That happened to a friend of mine.
Yes.
The particular food she chose to have.
Oh.
It smelled.
Yeah.
You could smell it already to walk into his apartment.
Yeah.
It was a same stench. The closer we got to the apartment, the more
not that we're not used to. Sure.
Then we look into the thing there in the boiling water.
It was still swimming?
It was
it was flowing. Even if she were to want to bring her own pots, it would be a problem in her house. You know that a goy is not allowed to cook kosher from your pots. You know that. He makes the pots straight because of bishul akum. She made eggs. She wants to have scrambled eggs. She took your frying pan, she lit the fire, and she made herself an omelet, right? She just made your pan treif because of the Rabbanon, Bishul Akum. Bishul Akum is not only on the food, it's on the kelim too. Just the kelim, of course, you can make agola, you can make libun. The only time you're safe from that, if she wants to cook herself something, is if you lit the fire. Or you put the pan on the fire, then she can cook. As long as there's some involvement, some hecker, there's no Bishul Akum. Depending, of course, what she's making too. We'll talk about things that she's not allowed to make for you, as opposed to a cup of coffee you could buy in Starbucks. There's no Bishul Akum on coffee.
Except for the cigarette supervision.
Well, they won't allow it.
Warned against Starbucks coffee.
Why? For other reasons.
They wash the pots to get with.
Oh, there could be other issues. There can be other problems. Of course, you have to find out if everything else is okay. The ingredients. Akum Ovdei Kochavim Umazalot. It's an abbreviation for those who worship idols. Even though today they don't worship exactly idols, not all of them do. That's another name for them, for the goyim. Umos ha'olam, several other nicknames. So that's another topic, Bishul Akum. There are certain things they can make for us, but you'll be surprised. Many, many homes don't allow the goy to even touch anything in the kitchen. Even though if the Jew is involved, it's perfectly okay. No, just stay away. They're afraid, mixing melichas and fleishiks. They're afraid of all kinds of issues that can arise in the kitchen. But obviously there are heterim, as long as there's some hashgacha and or some involvement in the cooking process. So here we have a situation in Siv Daled. So I'm skipping Basar Sheni Salam and Ayin because I think we've covered just the basics about it. That you have to be, of course, aware of meat and not just leave it anywhere, because there can be a problem. Siv Daled. Maybe I'll read it inside first. Rov chanuyos moichos basar shchuta. So you have a situation where the majority of the chanuyos, the stores, are selling basar shchuta. That's basar kshera. Umiut, the minority. Doesn't say one. It says the minority. Moichos basar nevela. Lokach me'achas mehem. Same, like very similar to what we learned before. You took from one of them. Eino yodea me'ezon lokach. Fine. So far we know that it's kavua. It's asr. But what happened over here that's different is Taaruvot be'acheros, this piece of meat that we took that is now asr, got mixed in with Taaruvot with other pieces of, which is the typical classical example of Taaruvot. The Eino Nikeres, and of course you can't recognize which one it is. Guess what? The Mechaber says Betelo B'Roiv. It's Batel B'Roiv. You have a Roiv here, in this mixture, in this Taaruvot. Why? Why is it Batel B'Roiv? So he adds the key explanation over here is, even though we started off with a kavua, and now we went to a taruva, is mishum sfek sfeika. What do we have here? We have here something called a new concept, which we will see in Siman Kufyud, something called a sfek sfeika, a very powerful suffix, very powerful in the sense that it dilutes the whole issur here, in a sense, if we can use the word dilute. It takes a situation which we have a suffix and tells us, wait a minute, don't worry about the suffix because you have two sfeikas. Because you have two sfeikas, you have more leverage. There's more room to be matir, to be more lenient here. You have two, not just one suffix, because one suffix, well, suffix deraisa lechumra. Suffix deraisa. So here we're talking about suffix deraisa, obviously. It's a kavua, and it's more than a suffix. I mean, we say kavua is kavua. But here you have two sfeikas. What are the two sfeikas? Suffix number one, maybe it came from the mutter store. And if you're going to claim it came from the asr store, it got mixed up again. Maybe the piece that I'm eating now is the piece that's mutter altogether. Because I have a roiv, right? You follow me? You have two sfeikas. Say if suffix number one is what? It could have come from the kosher store. There's the majority. Statistically, maybe it did. And even if you want to say there's a chance it did not, it came from the usher store, from the treif store, who's to say the piece that I'm eating now is that piece? There are other pieces in the spot that it's mixed with. Maybe this piece is kosher. I have two reasons, therefore, to allow this one piece. Not the whole pot, maybe, but at least the one piece that I took for myself right now, I have reason to believe that it's a kosher piece. You see? When you have two sfeikas. Is that clear? It's a very important concept that we need to understand very well now, because we're going to learn a lot about it later.
One has to be very careful what the sfeika actually is.
Right, exactly. We will see that not every Sfek Sveka is a real Sfek Sveka. There are conditions, which is what the Siman contains quite a bit of, conditions of what constitute a true textbook example of Sfek Sveka. Not every time you have two Svekas is it called a Sfek Sveka. And look at what the Ramah says right away. Ramah says, no, I disagree. Ramah disagrees, v'yesh oisrim. Some say this is Asr. This scenario is Asr, v'chi hai gavno. Why? Mishum dekol mokom de isur b'mkoimoy have kemechze al mechze. Right, that we know. Everything, anytime an isur is b'mkoimo, like one store is there, it's an isur nikar, it's an isur b'mkoimo, it's kemechze al mechze. It's half-half, which means that it's Asr. That it's not a suffix. It's Asr. There's no suffix therefore. V'hoyel v'suffix harishon Asr min haTorah. Ain't kind of sveka lahati rak taruvos. All you have is one suffix left, which is the taruvos, right? Lo mikra sveka. The hochinog. That's the meaning. You can't treat the first one as a real suffix. The first part of this problem, step number one, is a kavua, and if it's the first step is a kavua, there's no suffix. It's also in a Torah. That situation that you don't know from which store it came from, it's not even a suffix. It's a kavua. Yeah, we're going to understand this a little bit deeper. It says, how could you call that a suffix? That's not a suffix.
Whether it's the Asr piece is a question, but when such a question applies, that it's then Asr is the Raisa, no question. If the piece, whether the piece a kosher piece or a nevela, on that I have a question. But once I have this question, I'm not allowed to eat it. And the fact that I'm not allowed to eat it is no suffix. I'm for sure not allowed to eat the raisa. That's what he's saying.
Yeah, exactly. There's no suffix about that.
Now, after hearing that, the question is Mechaber.
Oh, of course. Now everybody's going to gang up on the Mechaber.
Not ganging up?
Yeah.
Just asking?
Just asking, yeah. But from different angles. There's going to be two big questions on the Mechaber here, which is very interesting. And of course, the Shulchan does, I think, a nice job explaining it. There's other Meforshim who explain the Mechaber. Obviously, the Mechaber is aware of the coming questions on him, and we will see. But that's what we need to understand.
I'm sure the Ramah didn't make up his.
No. Everybody, by the way, everybody takes this from the Makor. So, what's the Makor of the Mechaber? First of all, where does this come from? This halacha is based on the Rashba, which is really based on the Gemara. The Gemara in Zvachim about. I'll just tell you briefly that Gemara discusses. Rings or cups of Avodah Zorah. As you know, Avodah Zorah is Asur Behano. Remember, there are a few items in Halacha that are Asur Behano. They can't even benefit from it. So if something is Asur Behano, and it's mixed in a mixture, you can't benefit from the mixture either. There are situations, however, where you can take out a portion of that mixture and throw it to the Yam. No, so I'm not benefiting. That's when we say that when we allow the taruvas, we would allow that kind of a scenario where you take out one that may be usher and throw it out and assume that that's the one, so that you don't eventually benefit or eat it, have any hana from that one. Even in other words, that's in the case where we allow the taruvas. But when something is usher behana, generally speaking, from avodah zorah especially, even if it got mixed. The whole thing is asur now, even in 1,000. It's avodah zorah in there. Asur behana. Even if it got mixed, the whole thing is asur behana.
Would you just sell it if you deduct the value?
That's what I said. There are times.
But here not.
No. That the Gemara does not discuss this, right? But there are times where you would be able to not benefit from the value of that. They throw it away, and the rest would be okay. But without applying that heter whenever that's possible, the Gemara here discusses this situation, that if this taruvas, which is osir, behano, fell into another taruvas, it's mutter. Wow. Right? In other words, even though, that's the way the Rashba learns, it is obvious that the first, doesn't mean the whole taruvas necessarily, some of it fell in, right? Even though what's coming out of this first mixture is a kavua, a form of kavua.
It's a certain isser.
It's a certain isser. Nevertheless, somehow the Gemara says that if this fell into another taruvas, it's mutter.
We wouldn't recognize the difference. It's also a
but the chiddush over here, the chiddush in the Gemara was, even though the first mixture The first taruvos is asur b'hano. Once it falls into a second mixture, the halacha is different.
And Basar Chalav is also. The piece of Hanan falls into their meat.
Yeah.
Even though the Hanan is Asur Hanan, I'm talking about Basar Chalav, it was not so
Right.
together. Hanan.
Right.
But it can be spapel in the...
But that's as far as isur b'hano is concerned. You can't have it. You can't eat it.
It itself not, but the Taaruvot I can...
No.
I can't recognize the particular...
You have to have shishim.
Yeah.
You have to have the shishim. Right. But here,
It can be misbatel.
it can be misbatel. Yeah.
But by Kavod we said it's not misbatel even in the thousands.
Right.
Hanan also...
No, it is. It's not.
Hanan itself...
Hanan itself is bottle. It's always bottle. The only thing is you need shishim can get the whole hanan, can get the whole piece. That's all.
Yes.
Here the chiddush is something which is also b'hano is not bottle, because it's avodah zarah we're talking about. Okay, because of that it's not bottle in the taruvos because it's also b'mashu. It's also b'mashu.
But not the whole Taaruvot is asur.
The whole taruvos is also.
No, not the whole Taaruvot is.
Yeah, but you can't have enough from that first
But now you
taruvos.
can't have any of it.
Right. So the chiddush in that Gemara, from where the Rashba learns our din, is that if a portion of that taruvos falls into another taruvos, the halacha is itzur b'hano. So therefore he says, listen, that's the Gemara. And therefore, even though here kavua is half, it can mechzal domi, you don't have roiv, it would be usr. But if it falls into another taruvos, it would be mutter. Okay, that's what Mechaber says. If Mechaber learns this from the Rashba.
Does it have to be actually another Taaruvos or the first Taaruvos that falls into?
No, another taruvos.
So the Kavod to fall into the first Taaruvos it falls.
It's usr. The first taruvos is usr, right? In the avodah zarah case.
I'm talking about our case.
Yeah. So our case, what you have here is a piece that you're not sure where it came from. Okay, it's usr. But now, in the meantime, before you were told that it's usr, it fell into a whole. The balabosta cooked it all up.
So it's the first Taaruvos.
It's the first taruvos, yeah, but it's a second suffix,
Second topic, first.
right? So Mechaber says it's a second suffix. That's how he explains it. He actually gives an explanation for it, that you really have a sphex faker. But Ramah says, no, that's not a sphex faker. Why not? Because the first suffix is not a suffix. I told you it's also. It's also minator. It's half. It's not a suffix.
So what does the Ramah say to this one?
Oh, so that's what the shir is about. A little bit about this whole chiluk between the Mechaber and the Ramah, and what does the Rashba really have in mind when he compares it to the Gemara? Yeah. Yeah. Everybody agrees the first one is not mutter. It's kavua. It came from a kavua. I don't know from which store it came from. Well, tough.
The first Taaruvos, you're calling the kavua, the situation where I'm not sure whether this store or that store. The stores together, you're calling the first Taaruvos.
I am, and I'll tell you why soon. I am. The Ramah says no.
Yeah, I understand that, but
yeah, I'm because I'm
you're
based.
calling the first mixture of stores. You're calling the first.
I am. Yeah, I
know when it fell into the pot.
Because I'm already a little bit ahead. I'm going to try to explain the Mechaber, right?
Because it was for me it was a chiddush when you said that you're calling the first mixture.
That's right. Yeah, I guess I slipped.
You weren't supposed to say that yet.
No, it's okay. It's all right. It just comes out. But of course, we have to understand how the Mechaber learns Pshat. Now, the Mechaber here has, of course, a big job. He has to, as we say, to farenferen. He has to explain himself in two halachas in the same siman that he wrote that are very opposed to what he just wrote, what he is writing here. He himself. It's not just we have a question, akasha lamaisa, as we say. How could you say that? No, he himself writes in two seifim later, two separate halachas that are contrary to what he just said. And what are those two halachas? I already mentioned it, might as well go to them. There is a sif ches, remember we're in sif dalet. There is a sif ches and a sif ches in this siman. Yud is the last sif. So sif ches says like this. In sif ches is davar she'eno botol machlach chashivusa. Something which is not botol because of its chashivus. Remember that? Davar she'beminyan, right? Roi liskabed, right? It's not botol because of its chashivus. She'nisarif b'chera. Right? It got mixed up. So, it's aser. Why? Because afilu be'elef lo botol. We know that. No. But we never learned the halacha by chaticha rirus kaber or by davar shebeminyan or by birya. We never learned the following scenario. Any one of those that after they're mixed, which they're not botol be'elef, first time around, if they went ahead the nafal me'ataruv says echod lishnayim acherem, one piece of that taruvas fell into two additional pieces. V'nofal min hashloisha, from these three, echad l'shnayim acherim, to another two, harei elu acherim mutarim. Okay, so what does the Mechaber tell us in Sif Ches? The only time I will allow you for a double chashuv to be bottle, when we know the halacha is that afilu be'elef la bottle, 2 more times.
Right.
3.
The third time is
mutar. What did you say here in Sif Daled? You never mentioned anything about 3. There you yourself said 3. You need 3, so why here is okay? Where did you get 2? Here you're applying 3 to all davar shachot, davar chashuv. I mean, what's this? How is this any different? Question number 1. Good question.
But wait a second. When we say kavua, it's 50-50.
Right.
We say that it's not misbah.
Well, yeah, you have 900 stores that are kosher and 1 is straight.
No, that's on the first Taaruvot.
Right.
No, but we're not saying that it's not misbah. We're saying the result is 50.
Right. In the next one, it's not just roib, even more. It's not misbatel. No, we don't know that yet. Good question. From the Mechaber, all it says is roiv. He doesn't get into the question of 1,000 because this is now one of those things that we lobatel afilu be'elah. It's even better. He says you don't need to forget it. You don't need 201. Like Truman or a special shiur. Either you have roiv, or if you have tam, a problem, you have shishim. The elav thing doesn't really apply here. All right. Question number 1 understood on the Mechaber. We're going to have a problem with the Mechaber. Mechaber, you yourself wrote later on. There's a possibility of 3 taruvas where you can save the day, but not 2. Sif Dalet speaks about 2 sfeikas. Even though I agree that the first one is not a real taruvas, real in quotes, but it's a first suffix, and the second one is a second suffix. But Mechaber, you talk about 3. What did you get this about 2? All right. Question number 2, which really the Ramah is talking about more than question number 1. Sif Tes. Suffix treifa. You have a piece of meat. You don't know if it's treif or not. The mashgiach did not put a stamp on it, and he possibly should have put a stamp on it because there was some meat over here that was treif, and this could be that it came from this lung. So that's called a suffix treifa. Suffix treifa shenis arev be'acheros. It got mixed up, but in the meantime, before you were going to dispose of it or give it to the goy, here, have some dinner. Because I'm not sure about this one. Before you had a chance to do that, came along the other helper, or the schlepper, whatever you want to call him, right? And he mixed everything together. He just put everything into the truck, and it's all mixed up. So suffix treifa shenis arev be'acheros. Kulan asuros. What? Yeah. Ad sheyeh beheter kedei levatel ha'isur. Im hu midvorim ha'mizbatlim. Until there will be enough in the heter to mevatel the isur, if it's from the things that are mizbatel. Shekiven shesofek arishon hoyo begufoi, ein lehatiro misfek sveika.
So two points here. Point number 1, so what he's saying is, only when, if I knew for sure that it was the tree, and now I can't determine which one is the tree misbatel because of majority, only then can I be misbatel the sveika. If I had known that, I wasn't sure if it was a lung from the treifa animal or not.
Yeah.
Let's say I knew for sure a lung from the treifa animal got mixed in.
Right.
But now I don't know which one is the lung from the treifa animal. If I have a scenario where I would be to mevatel the vadai, now I can also be mevatel the suffix treifa.
I'm not familiar. One more time.
We have here a suffix treifa. We have
Right.
a lung that may have come from the treifa animal. We don't know.
Yeah.
So the Mechaber is postulating, if I understand it correctly, when can I be mevatel this suffix treifa? Only in a situation where the vadai treifa would also be misvatel.
Okay.
Is that what he's saying?
Yes.
So in other words, the suffix treifa is no worse than the vadai treifa. That's all. In a situation where the vadai treifa would also be misvatel, so then I can also be mevatel the suffix treifa. But anything short of that, I can just because I cannot utilize the fact that it's a suffix treifa.
Right.
I have to treat it like a vadai treifa.
Yes.
That's basically what he's saying.
Right. So in other words, even though it's a suffix treifa, you would need the regular amount that you would ordinarily use, like you said, for a vadai treifa, because it's a suffix treifa does not make it any less.
Or the same conditions, because if it could be mavad, so it's not just the one way, we also the conditions.
Yeah.
In this case, if I understand correctly, the petition is the number.
Yeah. In other words, let's say this is a real treifa. Let's say it's a real treifa. A real treifa, and it's not a royalist carpet piece. It's a gorgol. You know what a gorgol is?
Yeah.
Whatever. How do they call it in English? Just the neck, the chicken neck, whatever. The gizzards, the pupiks, not the pupik, whatever. Anyway, I already forgot the name of it. Gizzards in English, yeah. It's not a royalist kaba, it's a small piece of muscle. Got mixed in. I mean, it's bottom roiv, just like anything else. If it's not a chaticha royalist kabed, it's not a double shebeminyan, it's not a birya, I mean, it's not a problem. Once you have the required amount, it's bottom roiv. That's what bitul roiv is. But here we wanted to get away with it. We thought, suffix treifa, it's a suffix only. It's not a treifa vadai. Still, suffix treifa shenitzar b'chayos kulon asuroi, still. Ad sheyeh behet kedei lebatel isim u'midrol b'mizbatlim. Obviously, if it's from one of those things that is battled, shekivan shesuffix orishon hoyo begufoi, ein le'atir misfek sveika. So here the Mechaber says, since the first suffix is begufoi, in the goof of the meat, there is a suffix. The second suffix is a suffix taruvois. I can't see it. Where is it? It's not nikar. Are these two sfeikas identical? What? The word would be? Okay, maybe that's even better. Are they equivalent? Because one of the klalim by sfeika that we will learn is that the sfeikas need to be equivalent. They need to be similar. No, here the two sfeikas, the two doubts are very, very different doubts. The first doubt we have is which store did it come from? The second doubt is about a mixture. Which piece is it? It's a doubt. I go by roiv. So here, because the first suffix in the treifa is in the goof of the piece of meat, I don't know if this piece of meat is treif or not. That is not equivalent or similar to the second suffix. Which one is it? I would have to have two very similar sfeikas to allow for sfeika. Yeah. Different. One is I have to determine b'chlal if this is kosher or not. Whole different question. And the Mechaber himself is explaining this, right? He's saying that if something is in the goof and the other suffix is not in the goof, it's about a mixture, cannot be treated as a sfeika.
Frankly, I don't for the following reason.
All right.
It's not that I didn't know whether the lung of treifa animal is treif. I know that there is a lung somewhere here that's treif, originally, before it became stiff.
Yeah.
I just don't know if any one particular lung is that treifa. So already there it's a question of mixture. If I only had one animal that was slaughtered, and I only had one lung, and I knew the animal was treif,
right,
then I knew this lung is treif. I wouldn't have a question.
I'm looking at one piece of meat in the beginning.
But why is it that what is preventing me from knowing whether this meat is the treifa one?
Right.
Because there are other ones as well, and I don't know whether.
Not necessarily.
So why don't I know whether this is the treifa?
I have the whole slaughterhouse is clean. One piece of meat was left. I'm not sure if this is a treifa or kosher piece.
But if only one animal was slaughtered in that day, and it was a treifa animal, I wouldn't have a question.
No. All kinds of animals were slaughtered.
So it's a taaruvos.
Yeah.
Because it's all sorts of animals were slaughtered, so it's a taaruvos.
Yeah, but I'm not looking at the taaruvos. It's not a taaruvos here. What I really
but
have.
It's the taaruvos that establishes a sveika. The previously present taaruvos, the fact that there was a taaruvos during the day.
It's much more a din of kavua, if anything, than a case of taruvas, because I'm looking at a piece of meat right now. I'm not looking at a taruvas, a physical mixture of 3, 4, 5. It's a different kind of situation. I have to make a determination now.
But the kavua was the.
Yeah. So this is not a real kavua, but it's a suffix in the goof of Basar. Versus a suffix as to which one here is the treif piece of meat. One of them is. Here, I don't even know that it's treif. When I have treif in a mixture, I know one of them is treif. I'm already giving you a little bit of a hint over here. Okay? When I have a mixture of a typical classical taruvas, I know there is a treif in there. It's muchzak. The isur is muchzak. There's something there that it's asar. I'm just allowed to eat one for sure because of kol the porish meruba porish, or the Rosh says that it's transformed to heter, the isur, whatever. I grab one, and I'm assuming I'm grabbing the heter. But here, I have a piece of meat. I don't know. It could be as easily treif or kosher. It's a different kind of suffix. Yeah, this one. That's what's called a suffix begufa iser or begufa chaticha. Yeah, begufa chaticha. I have a suffix about this chaticha. What is it? Here, in a regular taruvos, I know for sure I have an iser. I just don't know which piece it is. I know for sure there's an iser. Okay, so it's a different kind of suffix. This is one kind of a suffix. This is a different kind of suffix. However, in that seif, the mechaber is being mechadash to us that even though I started off with a suffix to begin with, and now I'd like to have two sfeikes, I don't for sure have in the taruvos a real iser here. It could be mutter. The whole thing could be mutter because the first chaticha was in itself a suffix. Great. Then we have a typical, what I would think is a typical sfeika. What's the suffix number one? Suffix, it's kosher or treif. Even if you say it's treif, it's mixed here. And therefore, I have a suffix again. Now, if you have an amount to be mevatel, the iser, that's not a problem. We obviously are talking about in a situation where you don't have enough to be mevatel. If you have enough in this taruvos to be mevatel, let it be a real iser. I don't care. I have enough to be mevatel. It's not a chaticha really skabed. The problem is I don't want to have a real roiv here. I wanted to get away with it because of sfeika only. Suffix, heter, mutter. Okay, got mixed in with one more. Even if you tell me it's treif, maybe the one I'm grabbing now is mutter. No. Can't use sfeika to be matter that mixture if there's no roiv in that mixture. If there's roiv, of course. We don't care. Let it be a real issue. So you understand here? So the mechaber is mechadash, not only he, I mean everybody agrees with that sieve, that over there's a suffix in the guf ha'iser. You cannot use that kind of a suffix for sfeika purposes. That's all. We eventually will be learning about sfeikas. That's a whole Torah in itself here, in this Siman, what constitutes a good sfeika and what not. So they use this against the mechaber in Sif Dalet. Mechaber, from two directions you're being attacked here. Sif Ches, you require yourself 3 taruvas. And Sif Tes, you yourself said, you cannot use a sfeika when the first suffix is in the gufa iser. And guess what? Here, it's very similar. Because why is the Ramah saying don't use the sfeika in Sif Dalet? In other words, allow the mixture? Because they're not two sfeikas mishem echod. When we learn Hilchos Sfeika, we will be taught that the two sfeikas have to be mishem echod, from the same name, from the same reasoning, same shoresh. Here, they're not. Suffix number 1, which store did it come from, has nothing to do with the second suffix that I have a taruvas here. It's not mishem echod. Comes along the Gro, the Vilna Gaon, and says, what a hell? The Mechaber knows what he's talking about. It is mishem echod. Because we're talking about taruvas chanuyas too. That's why I told you before, there's a taruvas by the chanuyas. The Vilna Gaon learns like that in the Mechaber. He's the only, I think he's one of the only ones that justifies the Mechaber easily, in other words. Leave him alone. It is mishem echod. Why? It's a taruvas chanuyas too. You have 9 and 1. You don't know which one. So that is enough to call it a sfeika. In Ochiname, it's a kavua. But in order to build a sfeika, the Vilna Gaon says, you want it to be mishem echod, this is sufficiently mishem echod. Here you have a mixture of chanuyas, here you have a mixture of taruvas, the second taruvas, that's it. The Vilna Gaon doesn't address the other question. We will see what the other fortunes say. But as far as this question, he addresses it very nicely. Shach and Taz, there's a lot of Shach and Taz here. The Taz, of course, asks the questions on the Mechaber. On the Rashba, he doesn't ask the question, even though this comes from the Rashba, because he says that the Rashba himself, and it's true, in the end, he's machmer like the Ri in Tosfos, which holds that it has already become asur, like the Ramah learns pretty much, like it has been. Once it has become asur, we don't allow it to combine with another suffix. I mean, it's the first time it's not a suffix. Well, actually, the Tosfos, I think what he said was something else, that if it's in the guf ha'isur, then it doesn't constitute as a first suffix to begin with, or as two similar sfeika. Either way you learn it, many of the Achronim and Rishonim would not agree here that there's two sfeikas here.
So the Rashba agrees.
Right, so that's why the Taz doesn't ask the question in the Rashba, because the Rashba is choishish for that svara that says whenever you have a suffix in the Gufa Isra, you cannot use it for a spek sveika.
The Mechaber is based on that.
Right.
So
therefore he asks on the Mechaber, okay, so we have to understand the Rashba. So we still have to understand the Rashba and how he brings this halacha. Why does he introduce this halacha to begin with? So that's where we have the Bach. If you look at the Bach also writes very interestingly a whole thing on this sieve, that the Rashba was only matir in this scenario of sveika when you're dealing with the kavua derabbanan, not in a situation where the kavua is d'oraisa. That's what the Bach wants to learn. That's how the Taz also, I think, wants to learn that the Rashba learned. That lechatchila, his halacha will be based only in a kavua derabbanan, because he's choishesh to the shitas hatoysos. Shach disagrees with both of them, the Taz and the Bach. Shach says, no. The Mechaber, the Rashba, they're talking about a case of kavua d'oraisa. Why did he allow sveika here? What's the havamina to allow it here? Very simple, for a different reason altogether. You remember the din of kavua? That's a chidush. Remember we learned that kavua is a chidush? Therefore, all you have is the chidush. Don't expand that isur into other situations. In other words, when it's kavua by itself, it's also mechsa. But once that kavua gets mixed into taaruvos, it's a whole different halacha. It's no longer the kavua. So the Shach learns, even though lemaisa he's machmir too, like the Ramah. I think I'm almost sure even the hefsem merubah. I think that the Shach doesn't go along with the mechaber. Even the Kappa Chaim says don't go like the mechaber necessarily. But in understanding the mechaber, he says no. He learned that this is a real kavua d'oraisa, but it's a chidush kavua. The whole kavua is a chidush. Since it's a chidush, you are allowed to use it in a sveika situation, because then kavua loses its koyach, loses its status of kavua. You only have kavua in the chidush scenario, in the chidush situation, in the classical example of the Gemara, where you don't know which story came from. But now you want to introduce another situation and say, oh no, it's kavua. No, it's no longer that same kavua. So that's how we understand the Rashba initially, explaining that the halacha is similar to the Gemara's halacha, and the Mechaber goes along with it because it's a chidush, and you don't take that isur of kavua one step further and say that it's going to be also asur in a taruvos. No, I will be able to allow the din of sveika to work here. That's what the Mechaber says. It is a sveika. What's interesting is I saw somebody raise a good question. If it's sveika, what do you need roiv? If it's roiv, what do you need sveika? Right? You understand the question? In other words, why do the two have to be mentioned here? You know, right? The Chaber says, "Betelo beroiv mishum sveika." If there's a sveika, what do you need roiv? That's one of the questions. So the Yad Yehuda, one of the Meforshim here, says, by sveika alone, they would not have allowed it, because you have a tie to the sasri. He says that you have two things that are contradictory here, because what you're saying is that all the chatichos should be mutter here. Once you say sveika, all the chatichos would have to be mutter here, and that's not possible because we know one of them is really also midin kavua. So it's only because of bitul meroiv min haTorah that you're allowed to use the sveika to it. Midin haTorah, there's bitul meroiv. That's his explanation of why the Mechaber says there's two things here. It's bitul meroiv because of sveika. Sveika by itself would not be sufficient to allow it.
The sveika is not the kavod. The sveika is the first suffix is there's a suffix. Put aside kavua for a moment. On this meat there is a suffix.
Right.
In addition to that, we have another additional problem of kavua. The roiv takes care of the kavua, so now I'm only left over with a suffix on the first. So that suffix is now unites with the second suffix.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, something like that, pretty much. Yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much the explanation with regards to one of the questions on Mechaber as far as how he deals with the sveika, where it's really two different kinds of sveika. Either you have the Vilna Gaon's explanation that this is really a true sveika because they're both taaruvos, and you have the situation here that the other thing that the Shach brings down, that it's only a chidush. The whole din of kavua is a chidush, and if it's a chidush, you can allow it to be used in a svek situation. In other words, even though they may not be exactly the same, but because it's a chidush, you are allowed to build a svek from it. Okay. What about the other question we had on the Mechaber? The other question was also a very good question. Mechaber himself said later on that you need 3 taruvas to allow for bittul. And here he's allowing for 2 mixtures, in a sense. 2 svekes, right? What do you do with that? So we have 2 explanations. We have the Shach that says that Mechaber would hold that the din of kavua is not as strong as what you have in Sif Ches. What do we have in Sif Ches? We have Sif Ches, we have a double chashuv. Right? Remember? Sif Ches, you have a double that is not bottle because of its chashivas. When can it become bottle? 3 mixtures. Once you have 3 mixtures, even a double chashuv is bottle. Right? 3. So the Shach explains the Mechaber would probably hold, remember he asked this question too, they all asked the question. So the Shach's way of understanding the Mechaber, at least he offers a good explanation, is that perhaps the Mechaber holds that the din of kavua is not as strong. It's a chiddush, remember. It's not as strong as a double chashuv. By double chashuv in Ochiname, the Chachamim said it's not even bottle be'elef. For some reason. It's a chashuv. So you need 3. But here, kavua, yes, kavua kemechzel mechzel domen, but it's not as strong that I require 3 taruvas, like by double chashuv. Very simple. And he adds one more point, which is also very important. The Shach holds there are other poskim later on, that hold that 2 taruvas is enough. You don't need 3. If that's the case, together with the other poskim that hold you don't need 3 taruvas, 2 taruvas is enough, then by kavua, which is a chiddush, we would only be machmir on the chiddush step. In other words, the first time we have a problem, a doubt. But if there's another taruvas, we wouldn't worry about it. We would not require 3. You see, so the Shach offers 2 explanations. One, that this is perhaps not as serious or as strong of an issue, of a problem as Sif Ches, which talks about Vorim Chashuvim, which requires 3. And number 2, there are poskim that hold that 2 taruvas is enough. So the Mechaber says, you know what, here the problem is kavua. 2 is sufficient. That's all. I saw the Shar HaMelech that gives another explanation. Why does the Mechaber require 3 taruvas? Which we were talking about earlier. What happened over there? In that case, you have Ischazek Isura. You know what Ischazek Isura means? An Isur has been discovered, an Isur exists, an Isur has been identified. I mean, I don't know where it is, but there's an Isur here. And that Isur is a double chashuv. So you know what? It's not bottle of Elef, and you need 3. But it's Chazak Isura. There is a real Isser being dealt with. Here, who's to say that there was an Isser to begin with? It may turn out that this entire piece that I have a doubt about came from a kosher store. I don't know for sure that there's an Isser here. Gewaldig. I love this teretz. Over there, it's therefore, I can understand it. Shar HaMelech says, why the Mechaber there is requiring 3 taruvas and here not. There it is Chazak Isura. Mashenkin over here. Who says that there's an Isra over here? Maybe he took it from the kosher store. The Ramah, we said, Asers. He considers it, of course, an Isser Kavua. There's no suffix to begin with, as we said. He passes like the Isser Beheter, that once the first Isser is considered a Vada Isser, then you don't have a Svek Sveka. And the Shach passes like him. Unless you're talking about Sheporosh. If you have a situation where Sheporosh, you didn't actually buy it yourself. Somehow the piece came to you from one of these stores. There's more leniencies. Then you can be mitzaref the shita of the Ran that says that it's a kavua d'Rabbanan, which is less of a problem. So if you have that kind of a situation where it's Porash, which is only according to the Ran, a kavua d'Rabbanan, you could be lenient. Otherwise, it looks like everybody goes along with the Ramah here. They're not mekel like the Mechaber, even though it appears based on the Vilna Gaon and in the Shar HaMelech, which offers a very good explanation, that for both issues, first of all, the first issue was, what about, it's not a gufo shel iser? So we have the Vilna Gaon telling us on the first question that it is a taruvas, so the two sveikas are similar, right? And as far as the second issue, the second issue of why he required there 3 and here he required 2, you have the explanation of the Shach and the Melech. The Shach saying that he gives 2 explanations. That first of all, the din of kavua could be not as strong. Over there, it's a davar chashuv. It's a different kind of situation. Kavua, who says it's so strong? Second of all, not everybody requires 3 over there. There are persons who say 2 is enough. So between the 2, we can understand why the mechaber would only require 2. But the Shar Melech says beautifully. Over there, it's chazak isur. How could you compare the cases? Over there, you for sure have an isur. You need 3. Here, who's to say that you have an isur? Especially when the whole kavua din is a chidush. So to take it one step further in the Taaruvot. So therefore, the mechaber is standing on very solid ground. Even though everybody wants to go with the Ramah and not be matzah. This is not a real svek sveika. That's a good question. Is this a real svek sveika? But apparently the Vilna Gaon pointed it out. That listen, it is in a sense mishem echad. The 2 are mixtures, different kinds of mixtures, albeit, right? But in the end, it is enough, similar, for us to be able to build here a svek sveika, to be matzah. So I think we'll stop over here. And I think we've really covered the Siv Dalet pretty much. And there are going to be some additional scenarios that we're going to look into next time.